So our focus today is going to be to talk about the self-service portal. I mean, we've been using it indirectly in these past sessions when we did the request approval functionality. We also were using it when we did the access certification in the last session. So today we're going to focus on it a little bit more and go into it a bit deeper. We're going to talk about how we can customize the branding, how we can limit the level of access that people have within the portal. Also common features like the self-service password reset. So and as always, if you have questions, feel free to post, and I'll try to do my best to answer them. Okay. So before we get into that, let's just kind of talk a little bit about the kind of things that we can do in the self-service portal and what the purpose is. So the primary objective of the self-service portal was to provide an entry point for end users. And end users in this case are pretty much everybody except for your admins. So this can be the business users, it can be contractors, customers, literally basically everybody who's not an admin who can needs access to this information where they want to be able to say SSO into different applications. That's probably going to be one of our topics in the remaining sessions. We can also configure self-registration, which we'll cover today, and how to set that up. So this will allow people to request access or an account. We can do self-service password reset. We can also do profile management and password management from here as well. Request approval, you've already seen that we can do this. Same thing for user access reviews. There's also other features which are there, like, for example, there's a manager self-service, and then there's like a delegated administration. Right? And there's a lot of capability there, and it doesn't really apply to everybody. So you can use as much of it as you want to, or as little of it as you want to. It all depends on what your business needs are. Sometimes there's capabilities that we have, and there's, organizations have other ways of doing it, and they want to keep doing it the way that they are, or have a phased approach, right? So this gives us a way to kind of release as much as, the capabilities that we really need when we need it. So let's talk about how we can customize our branding. This seems to come up on almost every project that we do. And there's really 2 or 3 levels of how deep we can go with this. So at a very simple level, we can upload a new logo, and we can change the logo on the screen, right? That's really easy to do, and I'm going to show you how we can do that in a few minutes. We can go a lot deeper, and we can change the CSS file, introduce new JavaScript files, and that is something that we do pretty frequently, especially when we want to kind of tweak the look and feel, the fonts that are being used, the background colors, kind of make it align, especially if it's externally facing, to align with what the business's branding requirements are. There's a third level, which is a little bit deeper, where we can really reorganize things like the login page, and we can go pretty deep there. That part's going to be a little bit out of scope for our call today. We're going to focus on these first 2 items. Right? So if we look at the CSS files, if we wanted to customize them. So assuming that you've already created a CSS file, and I've given a really simple example here where we're bringing in a new font, and then we're just changing the body tag to use that font. So you can do something simple like this and create a new file. And then we can go ahead and deploy that file. And then once we deploy the file, we need to register it, as a theme in the OpenIAM console. Okay, and then we need to do a content provider. So let's go ahead and actually go through that process. Okay. So the first thing is let's log into our admin console. This is the instance that we've been using all along, and I logged in here already earlier. Not sure the session is still live, but we'll find out. Okay, so if I'm in the web console, then to create a new theme, I need to go to administration, and I go to UI themes. And so far, I don't have any kind of a theme that's been set up. So I can create a new theme. And, let's just say, And you'll see that over here, there's a path here that is pointing to a CSS file. So we can set this up, but we need to make we're going to have to make a change to deploy this file. Okay, so let's come here for a second. Let's just save this. And when we save this file, you'll see the next set of options that open up are where you can upload your logos. So for example, if for the login page and self-registration page, you're going to upload a logo here. There's a certain size that's recommended. You should try to get these images to be, pretty close to that size. It will help with the appearance of these logos. And then there are other sizing that we should take a look at to kind of create the logos in the different sizes that the app is going to be using it, right? So this is the easy part. So you upload these, you wait about 5 minutes or so, and you'll see these changes start to come through. Actually, there's one more step here. So assuming we create our new, we've uploaded our new logo. The next part, we save it, and we need to link this theme to the content provider. So we go to access control, and we go to our content provider. And in this case, we only have one. And you'll see that there is an option here called UI theme, right? And I can pick the theme that I just created and assign that. Save this, and now I wait 5 minutes for the cache to refresh, and you will see the theme take place, right? Just reload your page, and you'll see this come through, right? So this is all you really need to do to link that new logo and theme with your content provider. And the content provider is important because you may have different entry points. So for example, if we had created a DNS name and we created another content provider for it, then the theme should be linked to that content provider, and you can have a different look and feel for each entry point. And we do this sometimes on some of our projects when we have different types of users. So for example, like employees may have one look and one branding, but external people may have a different branding. And so it gives us a easy way to kind of introduce a slightly different look, maybe even different content on that page. So now that we've done that, then let's work on the CSS file. That part's a little bit harder. So I've already logged into my Linux server, and this is where we deployed OpenIAM. And so remember early on in the first step that we did, we created a Docker Compose project. We downloaded it from the OpenIAM Git repository. So here, there is a folder with the YAML files, and we talked about this back then as well. And if we look at this, you'll see that it's organized by the kind of containers that we have. So let's go to the UI container. And let's edit this Docker Compose YAML file. Okay. So in this Compose file, you will see that there's an entry here for volumes. And you will need to create a new entry for these volumes to add over here. So let's just grab an example from here. So two parts of this entry here, and we're adding the section to the volumes. This first part is really it's a path on your Linux host. So this could be any directory that you want to, right? So you can create your own folder on the Linux host where we have installed all of these Docker containers, and then you're mapping it to this location here, which is under the Tomcat Web Apps static directory. You don't really need to worry about creating this path. You can really create whatever path you want. I recommend in the beginning just use our default because this is something that we've used time and time again, and it works as fine. So what's going to happen is you're going to save this and you're going to restart the UI container. And when the UI container restarts, it's going to create this path automatically in the UI container that you define. But it's actually this file on the local file system where you're going to be dropping your CSS file. So you won't really be, you won't have to go and move these files into the containers themselves. You're moving it to the volume that's mapped to, that the container is looking at. So in this respect, we also have customers where this is mapped to a shared folder or network drive. So consider that maybe the customer has a website or a website, a platform where they're keeping these things, and they can just drop their CSS files on that server, and we can map to it. So we actually don't even have to put it into our Linux box itself. And this gives us a little bit of flexibility in terms of how we manage and maintain these things and who gets access to these files, right? So once you deploy this, you're going to have to save this file, and you're going to have to restart the container. So to restart the container, there are a couple of different ways that we can do it. So one way is that we can remove that container, right? We just basically save that file. Just like we have the Docker PS command, right? We'll have a Docker stack, and then you're going to remove this container and run startup. Now, what startup will do is it's going to go through the full list of containers, and it's going to go ahead and say, well, are you up and running? And if you are, fine, I'm going to leave you alone. And then when it gets to the UI container, it's going to say, well, okay, you're not up and running, so let me restart you, right? And at that point, the UI container will start and it will reload. Now, this process is going to be it's a little slow, especially if you're working to make a change in, say, a production system and you don't want to have a longer outage. So for that, we can create a script, something like this. Let me just show you real quick, where it's a little bit more efficient. So we are going to remove that container, and then we're just going to redeploy that specific the UI container. So this will save a lot of cycles in terms of having to look for which container is up, and it will just get right to the point and basically update itself, right? So a couple of different, these are two different ways that we can do it. Like, just keep them in mind. The script is in our documentation as well, and you can use that. So now the container is up, but we have our new file in place. Now we need to make one more change. We need to register this with our content provider. So let's, at this point, I have the content provider already open. And at this point, I come down to the URL patterns. And so I'm going to say, create a new pattern. And here I'm going to say, static, and it's going to be, my custom, CSS file and right. And that's all I need to do. I'm going to inherit everything else from the content provider. Make sure you check off the is authorization disabled. And then under authentication rules, you need to add one more parameter here, which is the default non-auth rule. So basically, you want to make sure that there's no authentication that occurs on this URL, right? So once you do this, save this, and now you're ready to go, and your new CSS file will be in place. I have another instance where we already did this, and in this case, it was a static, it was a JavaScript that we uploaded. So we just said static custom GSS, right? Got the default no auth rule here, that's left. And then if I want to, I can test that page by entering that same path. So it's my IP address, whatever it is, static, and then I can do a help. It's a test page that we have, and where you will see your CSS file or your JavaScript file being used. Okay, so that's basically the path to introducing a new CSS file. So the uploading a new logo, piece of cake. Uploading a new CSS file is a little bit more work. And plus, obviously, you'll have to create the CSS file itself and do those, perform those steps that you need there. Okay, there's a question says, we changed the OpenIAM logo, followed the steps for the documentation, but when I applied a theme, it worked only in the Safari browser, but it's not working in Chrome and Edge. Any thoughts on why it's not working in Chrome? No idea why it's not working in Chrome. We test on Chrome all the time. Chrome's it's what we deploy most of the time. And I believe Edge is also a Chromium browser, so it should be working there as well. If you want, just drop us a note on support and we can help you kind of troubleshoot, why that's happening. There may be something in, if it's just a logo, then I don't see any reason why it should be acting up, but drop us a note and we'll see if we can help you kind of troubleshoot that. I think there's one comment that maybe it's a browser cache. It certainly could be. I think an easier way to, what we troubleshoot is just if you're using Chrome, then, go into the incognito mode and try that, see if that works. But if it's not working on Edge and on this, maybe there's something that's a little bit more wrong, and then we need to help you kind of fix it. Yeah, let's just kind of troubleshoot this offline and figure out what went wrong. Maybe there's something that needs to be tweaked. Thanks a lot for the question. So let's go to the next step. So the question is it necessary to add path in a Docker Compose that YAML file to implement the CSS file? Yes, it is necessary. You need to follow it exactly the way that I kind of defined. Otherwise, it's not going to work. It's really it's part of the syntax which is actually required. So, and just keep in mind that there's two paths. There's one which is your file system path on the Linux host, and then there's this path which is kind of like it's almost like a virtual path in a way if you're going to think about it that way, because this is going to get generated automatically internally in that container when that container is started up. So this part we don't need to deal with. But if you saw that in the test page that we had, this is the path that we're looking at in the test, right? It's like the slash static. So you need to make sure that the content provider part is correct too. Okay, so let's move on to the next part. So the next thing that comes up often is how do you control access to what people can do? So there's a lot of capability in that portal. Typical end users don't need all of it. In fact, it's certain that most of the end users won't need all of the capability which is there in the portal. So then the first thing that we can do is we can start to limit which menu options people can see. So when we talk about menus, just we need to keep in mind that menus are basically a type of resource. And if you remember from early on in our access control discussion, that basically resources are a part of our access control model, and you can entitle groups and roles or users directly to a resource. So since we can do that to a resource, then really any type of resource that we have, like a menu or URL, or we can control who can get access to it, right? So in this way, we can define who sees which menus. So first of all, let's take a look at the menus themselves. So the menus are organized as basically subtrees or tree. So you can think of there's a larger thing that we call a menu, and then within them there are these little trees which have the menu items on them, right? And there are two main trees that you need to think about. One is the IDM tree, and the other one is a self-service tree. And within them, there's a series of options underneath them. And so let's just make a kind of go back to our UI and take a look at these. So under access control, you'll find an option called menus. And as I said, there's IDM, which is right here, which is IDM. It's kind of a legacy name that's there, but it really refers to the web console. And self-service is a little bit more intuitive, where it really maps to your self-service portal. Right? So if we open up either one of these, you'll see the top level of menu options that you see in our self-service. You'll see my info, my applications, the request approval, and if you expand them out, you'll see the options that are available within them. Right? So, so now let's say if we click on one of these, like let's say we click on my approval, and you'll see, some metadata about them, right? You'll see the actual URL that is pointing to what the name is going to be of this menu option. And then you'll see these two flags here called is public and is visible. And they're a little bit confusing for most people. So is visible basically turns on and off the menu, right? So if you say it is visible is false, then it's hidden. It doesn't matter whether you are entitled to it or not. You will just not see this menu option, right? So if we don't want to show something, just turn this to false and you'll take it away from everybody, right? Now, is public means that that any authenticated user can see this. So we don't have to be entitled to this. So if we say something is public, it means that all users will see this in their in their portal, regardless of what their access control rights are or not. Okay. And then down below, you'll see, some, a little bit of a view in terms of who's already been granted access to this menu option, right? So you can see that the SuperSec admin has it, the manager has it. There is no direct entitlement on this here, right? So this is controlling what our menu can do. And I think we can drag and drop, move these things around. We can reorganize the look and structure of the menu if you want to. Okay. Now, once you have this, then the next part is about granting access to a user directly or to a group or role. So let's say if we go to access control and we pull up a role, and let's just pick up our end user role. And let's say if we wanted to we go to role entitlement. Actually, so we go to menus. And this was broken out a little bit outside of the normal entitlement structure, just because the objectives a little bit, it's a little different. And this is going to get refactored some more in version 4.2.2 when we redo our UI in React. There's a part of this which is just a little bit harder to use than we would like it to be. So let's say, for example, let's just go back to our self-service, right? And this is now going to show you what this one can do. So you'll see that the public menus, which are highlighted in green, implicit assignments are things which this role it's going to inherit from another role. An explicit assignment is what I've assigned to it directly. So let's say, for example, I want to now also open up a request history. So I can just double click there, and I should double click on the parent as well. And now at this point, I save this, and I've basically granted access to all end users to the request history menu option as well. Okay. I just save this, and then again, you wait a few minutes for the cache to refresh, and you should see access to this option on for those users who are in this role. Right? That's all that there is to it in terms of being able to grant access to this. This can get to be a little bit cumbersome, especially given the number of menus involved. Normally, what I recommend to people is if they want to do this kind of work and have different levels of access based on role, is before you start doing this, you might want to just create a role matrix to kind of have some structure of what you're going to assign to who, and then go ahead and start implementing them one by one. And this will give you just a little bit more of a reference point in terms of what you're trying to implement, and create some documentation along the way for what you're for the work that you're doing. So let's keep moving. Next part from here is the password policy and the synchronization. So, sorry, there's a question here. Okay, so I think this is more of a continuation of the logo, and it says I tried to change the logo from the UI theme, but it's not getting loaded. Okay, so there's a lot of detail on here. I'm probably not going to be able to process this on the fly on this call. So I think the best that option is if we can take this offline, kind of take a look at what was going on, and what we can do is we can publish the answer to this question, for the overall group of people who've been attending these sessions, so that we're kind of sharing this information. Okay, if you we have everybody's contact list, so I think it's just drop us a note and we'll follow up on this and help you get past this. Okay. So the next one was about the password policy and then synchronization. So when we deployed our connectors, the AD connector early on, we're working with Active Directory. Pretty much all the connectors have the ability to do password syncs, which means that a password change coming from the OpenIAM side will get published onto the message bus, and it will get sent to the connectors which a user has an account in. And then those connectors can go ahead and update the password. So unless we call it out, all connectors should really be able to support this capability. And this is a one-way flow. So it's the flow is going from the OpenIAM side to the connector to the target system. And the reason is that to go the other way, we would need to be able to somehow detect a password change, or to be able to to be able to pull this, pull it back and send it to OpenIAM. Okay, there's another question. Is there someone that can help me with a local, on-premise install? So yeah, we could definitely help you with the install, and the best thing is to kind of drop us a note so that we can follow up with, but also share with us what you've done so far. We have a few videos about this, and we have some documentation about it, which has been pretty consistent in terms of how people have been able to get started. So if you're stuck, just at least let us know where you're stuck so that we can help you with that. Okay. Now, kind of going back to our password sync, there is one exception to this, which is the AD password filter. So the Active Directory password filter has kind of been part of OpenIAM for many, many years. And it uses a hook, which is an Active Directory, where you can deploy basically a DLL there, and it will listen for password changes, and it will send them back to OpenIAM. And then from there, you can then propagate them to all the other systems that you have access to. Okay. So the filter is the exception to it. So now, when it comes to doing these password changes, they're controlled by the password policy, and the password policy is going to allow you to define what the password composition is, how frequently the password should be changed, and also any forgot password rules that you may have. Right. So easy way to kind of go and determine where we can find these. Right. So again, back to our web console, and we go to policy and password policy. And again, right now we only have one policy. Okay, and so if you look at this interface, it's kind of broken out into a few different steps. So the first part of the password policy composition. So this is where you can define what your how many the min max characters, which are uppercase, lowercase, the length. You can kind of randomize your password as well, right? The details of this, also the history versions that you want to follow, so on and so forth, right? So besides the policy, then we have the forgot password parameters. So this is going to control, which options we show and how they're going to behave, right? So in terms of how many failed attempts are they supposed to be? So for example, and we can control the differences between, say, using OTP versus challenge questions, right? And also how often we need to change it. There's also an option down here that's import export. This is really referring to a password dictionary. So if we wanted to upload a password dictionary of words which you're not allowed to use, then this is something which you can do. And we have a default dictionary that we can provide to be able to kind of jumpstart this if you want to as well. So one of the other things that which we need to keep in mind is also is you can control which of these features you're going to show on that login page itself. So you may not want to offer, say, the forgot password capability. So in this case, you go to system configuration. So there's a question that, sorry, I missed that. The password policy configured in AD will be overridden? No, we will not override the AD password policy. If there is a password policy in AD, then the OpenIAM policy should be at least as restrictive as the password policy that you have on the AD side. So there's nothing on the OpenIAM side that will allow you to override the configurations that you have in your target systems. Basically, the idea is that OpenIAM needs to coexist with these systems, right? So even if you use the password filter, what the password filter will do is basically take that policy, that change which has been accepted by AD, and then send it back to OpenIAM for it to be then passed on to other applications. Okay. So yeah, no way to override the policy at all. Right? And we really don't want to do that. Yeah. Yes, exactly. It should be at a minimal. The policy in the OpenIAM side must be as restrictive as the AD policy, or more so. So you can make it more stringent. You can't make it less stringent, right? And then if you do, you just have password reset failures, and that's just going to it's going to annoy people. Okay. Okay. So on the in the system administration, go to password, right? And here we can show what that change password screen is going to look like. So we can say, which options we want to enable, because there's two parts. There's a forgot password screen on the login page, and there's also a change password screen inside the self-service portal. So here, the show manage system dropdown. This allows us to kind of pick which applications you want to be able to change. Right. We also want to say, is forgot username going to be enabled? Do we want to allow challenge response questions, right? And then over here, you can see, which password reset methods are going to be allowed. Okay, so this way we can pick, let's see, we're going to add an interactive voice. We can call with the security code, right? So we can have a few different options here that we can build out, and the end user can pick from these options, right? Okay, so that takes care of the password policy part. All right, so we kind of covered that. The next part is, let's talk about how we can enable self-registration. So this is assuming you want to enable self-registration, and we'll show you where you can control it on the on and off behavior on that as well. Self-registration can be configured in two ways. So one, we can use it with an activation link, or we can use it with workflows. We can also have a simple one-page self-registration page where people fill out and it kicks us off, or we can also support a multi-page webflow. So let's go ahead and just start working with this from the user interface. So if we go to, again, under administration, under UI, there should be an option for self-registration somewhere. Yep, there's a checkbox that is self-registration enabled. So toggling this will allow you to control whether we allow people to self-register or not. So once we turn this on, then the question is, what do we want to show on it? And so we have in OpenIAM these page templates, and so we have we can create as many templates as we want to, and you can see that there are different templates which are being created. And so if I say, let's just take a look at my default, I look at the fields on the screen, and then I see that this default template is already linked to the self-registration page. And so this means that when the self-registration URL is invoked on that login page, it's going to use this template. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. So if we have a really simple need, this could be a way of doing that. There's another way that gives us a little bit more control, And what I would recommend is the way that we're going forward. And this is kind of a leftover legacy feature from earlier versions. In the newer versions, you can go to the self-registration configuration, and we can create a new self-registration page, right? So, so let's create a new page. So this is going to be so we're going to pick the content provider, which is going to be used with it. So again, this comes down, gives us the flexibility that if we have different URLs, there can be different registration pages that go with that URL. I'm going to make it active, so this starts to show up. Okay, this is probably because I already have a self-registration page linked on this provider. Let's just go back and delete what I have. So this will remove, so let's create a new page. Okay. So that was just a validation check, basically that two self-registration pages can't be saved to the same content provider. So you'll see that how this is organized. So first of all, it's saying it's the first step in your workflow. So I have the name of this step, and it's basically defaulting it in from from here, right? And it's got a page template that's being created, and you can introduce in here your custom JavaScript pages, your own validation scripts, and then we can start to build the pages, the fields that we want to show here. So let's say we want to do last name, first name. Let's say we want a nickname as well, and we want let's see, we want a phone number and we want email. Okay. So you see that the fields are being built out on these templates. So now the thing is, it's going to say, what do we do when this is completed, right? You say check the condition and apply actions based on that, or apply the action. So if I just say apply action, it means that, I can say, go ahead and start a new hire workflow, right? Which is going to trigger this off. Or I can say, can check the conditions. And here, if I say conditions, then I can start to, this goes back to the same rule builder that we had earlier in the business rules. We can start to define the expressions that we want to look at the variables which are on that page to evaluate, how we should use them, and define, have some control over this, right? So there's no Groovy scripting involved to be able to do this. So now that we do this, and so we say if positive, which means that the rules pass, then what am I going to do, right? So at this point, I'm going to say transition to the next step, right? And I'm going to say, what do I, and I can introduce a second step here in the workflow, where I can add a new step to this as well. So I actually want to save this at this point, and let's take a look at what we have so far. So if we go to dashboard and we do a refresh, we see that our new hire workflow has been started. So the first page has been defined. The second page is still pending, right? So let's go back and work on that second page. Okay. And I'm going to say create a new template. So I'm going to create a new page that goes with this. And I'm going to open this up in a new tab. And again, I'm going to go through the same process here as well, right? So maybe I'm going to build out, so maybe here I want to allow them to create a custom contact, add CAPTCHA, right? It doesn't really matter, right? And then at this point, I'm going to say initiate the new hire workflow. And if I look at my dashboard and refresh this, hopefully it should show. Okay, if I give it a second for it to refresh. I'm going to use a template which I created earlier. Okay. And at this point, it should, eventually it should go ahead and refresh this page. Yeah. So it starts to build this out. And now at this point, your self-registration page is is good to go. And when you invoke this, it's kind of going to go through that process, right? And so, for example, if we were to log out and come back here, we should see the page that we started to create, right? So this is the user nickname and so on and so forth, the components that we added. And that's about it as far as the self-registration process goes. The Groovy scripts and the components that we have, the flexibility of the hooks that we have, one of the things that we end up using them for is that some of the customers that we have, we need to do some validation, and the validation sometimes goes a little bit deeper than just some basic field validation. So for example, at one of our insurance customers, they have a business system that we need to call an API to look up some values. So we need to kind of validate those, the account holders who are signing up, that there are actually existing customers before we let them in. And so, that's one way of looking at it. You can also integrate with an identity proofing system if you wanted to be able to do some validation there as well. So it gives you an open-ended framework in terms of the kind of things that you can do during that step, and build out a much richer solution, which is not really isolated to just the out-of-the-box capabilities within OpenIAM, right? So it can allow you to kind of integrate a little bit more with the overall enterprise as well. That's all that we have planned for today. I mean, if you have any other questions, drop us a note. And the folks who, had additional questions, just reach out to us, and then we'll take it from there. I think there are some deeper questions which are probably a little bit harder to answer, on the fly like this, right? And yeah, that's it. So thank you very much for your time and making to joining, and we'll see you next week.